Yourself and
Got it. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
got you.
All right, great. Todd, I am a recovered alcoholic, and thank you guys for letting me be of service tonight. It's truly an honor, and thank you. Thank you to the group as well. My sobriety date or my surrender date is September 10th, 2012. I have a home group, which is the 7 p.m. Sunset Group, and we meet in New Jersey at the little town of Bagota, and we have meetings there 7 days a week. I also have a sponsor that has a sponsor that has a sponsor, and when I was in the grips of this fatally progressive disease, I used to go to meetings, and I'll say I was doing the untreated sobriety thing for a while, and I thought I had a solution. When people would introduce themselves and say, I have a sponsor that has a sponsor that has a sponsor, I would say, that's great, good for you, and I had no idea what that meant. And I share that because sponsorship is one of the most important things, of this program for me, and it continues to be, and it was at the beginning. At the time, though, I didn't even realize that, and I think without good sponsorship, and I always say, thank God for good sponsorship, I don't think I'd be here today. So that's really important. So for me, when I share, I usually, I try to stay away from the mess. I try to bring the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I'll share, a few stories here and there, but I'll share for about 20 or 30 minutes on, my experience, strength, and hope. And then the next 20 minutes, I'll share about, my experience with going through the 12 steps and having had that 12-step spiritual awakening as a result of the steps. So anyway, I shared my surrender date, and this is just so powerful. Growing up, I'll share a little bit about that. People remember their first drink, and all that stuff. For me, I don't remember when that was. I just remember that when I put that first drink into my body, I couldn't stop, and that was at an early age. I think I was about 12 years old. So, also for me, growing up from birth to about 15 years old, it was family, it was prison. It was that was my upbringing, my father in prison, my grandfather in prison. So I share that for two reasons. When I qualify, one reason is the poor me stuff. I can get that with years in sobriety. I can get that with counting days. If you had my life, you would be an alcoholic too. If you had my job, you would be an alcoholic too. Hell, if you had my wife at the time, you'd be an alcoholic too, whatever that looks like, And the second reason I share that is, for that step one, we admitted, and the way I was brought up in my upbringing from birth all the way until I surrendered was, I don't admit anything, to go into a room of Alcoholics Anonymous and raise my hand and ask another man for help, goes against everything on my upbringing, and that's why I share that story. And, I'm going to say, you're going to hear me say a lot tonight that, things got worse. I have a good buddy in the program, Ian from New Jersey, and he always shares, you never spiral upwards, and you're going to hear me say a lot tonight, things got worse, and it shares about that in Bill's story, things got worse. And so, around 14 or 15, I was the first one in my family to go to high school. I was the first one in my family, to go to college. Drinking is taking on more important roles in my life. I got a degree from college. You guys can laugh. I got a degree in philosophy. My buddy said, what are you going to do with a degree in philosophy, Todd? And my drinking was taking on, more serious proportions in my life. And he said, come with me and work on Wall Street, and I said, I had no idea what Wall Street was about, a little bit on TV here and there. And I said, okay, I had no interest in it. And I went for an interview. He said, come down for the bank that I'm working at and come for an interview at least. This was, really, many years ago. Right. And when there was a Wall Street with the Florida New York Stock Exchange and all that stuff going on, he said, come down for an interview at this bank that I'm working at. And I went down for an interview. I had no intention to get the job. Of course, I was loaded at the job interview. And, I went on about 4 or 5 interviews that day. And at the end of the day, the lady called me into the human resource department. And she said, we want to make you a job offer. She said, we really like you and we'd like you to take this position. And I had no intention of getting this job. And I told her, can I come back? It was a Friday. And I said, can I come back on Monday? Let me think about it over the weekend. And she said, she had never heard anybody in her 20 years of doing this refuse to take, this job, And I said, all right. So we talked and she let me come back on Monday. And make a long story short, that was my background. I wound up taking that job. And that was my background for almost 15 years. I was an international equity trader at a big bank here in New York City, you know, and it talks about in our big book, you know, now I have arrived, you know, now I'm out every day, I'm making money, you know, so now let me do what I want to do. You know, I love the term in this process, you know, I took a hostage, you know, I totally, you know, took this beautiful woman, you know, it's going to be different. And the drinking is continuing. And again, the progression, right? Fatally progressive disease, you know, and things are getting worse slowly. You know, I'm only going to do it on Thursday, Friday nights, and Saturdays. You know, now it's Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, blah, blah, blah. Now it's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Well, it's Sunday, so I might as well just keep going, you know, and again, I'm spiraling downward, you know, and again, let me have a child with this beautiful lady. It's going to be different, you know, let me throw money at it. It's going to be different. Let me just keep doing these things over and over, and it's going to be different. Let's have another kid. Let's throw more money at it. And at the end of the day, what happens? The drinking at the end, you know, started to get worse. My wife, you know, I realized, you know, I'll share about one quick little war story about the powerlessness over this disease. You know, one time in my grips of my disease, what happened was I told my wife this one particular night, I said, tonight, it was a girlfriend's wedding. I said, I'm not drinking tonight. I would have passed the lie detector test. I told her I was not drinking tonight. She said, that's great. I was going to drive there and drive her home, you know, just go to the wedding, no problem. Basically, they had the cocktail hour at the start of the wedding. She gets up to go to the ladies' room, you know, and step one, you know, the mental obsession kicks in, you know. Then I get that thought that overpowers all other thoughts. I go right over to the bar and I pick up a shot and I'm off to the races. Now the physical craving sets in, right? And then the unmanageability, you know, and she comes out at the end of the night. She's like, what's up, Todd? You can't even stand up. You know, it says in our literature too, sometimes the alcoholic, as myself, and speaking for myself, I have no reason why I did it, you know, and I'm just completely powerless. And I share this story because for me, and my truth is that no human power could have relieved me of this. You know, I tried everything on my own, by the way, you know, every New Year's, I'm giving up booze this year. This is going to be the year I'm doing it. 3 or 4 days later, I'm banging my fist on the bar. How did this happen again? I'm Catholic. Every Lent, I'm giving up, you know, you're going to give up chocolate this year. I'm giving up booze this year. You know, I said that for over 20 something years, you know, and I share that because again, no human power could relieve me of this. And, you know, that's an idea that I really had to get beaten into me because I tried it, you know, I'm the person that touches the stove and gets burnt. Right. And my thinking tells me, you know, let me tell you how I'm going to do it this time and not get burnt. And let me show you how, you know. So as my progression is continuing, you know, my wife is now pretty much had it with me. You know, I don't have to get into the stories. Everyone has them. You know, I'm not going to tell you about the brandy I drank and the vodka I drank. Everyone knows those stories. I'm going to tell you about, you know, how the unmanageability crept in and, you know, on the outside looked real pretty. You know, I had a beautiful watch. I had a beautiful wife, 2 beautiful kids at this time. We lived here on the water with a gated community. And on the outside was polished up real nice. You know, I looked really good on the outside. And I was dying inside, you know, that spiritual malady. You know, I couldn't look at them. I remember, you know, I had all these great things on the outside, all these material things. And I remember I couldn't look at myself in the mirror. You know, I was totally dead spiritually. You know, I have a guy in the program, and we always share about it. And he says, Todd, you didn't know you were sleeping until you were awakened, you know, and you're looking at a guy on the Zoom call right in front of you that was spiritually sleeping for almost 30 years, you know, and I had no idea, you know, and I'm just going along my day and just going deeper and deeper. And, you know, digging my bottom, you know. So as things are getting worse, a buddy of mine introduces me to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. As a guy I used to party with on Wall Street, you know, and I remember he was counting days and he had 30 days and I had no idea what that meant. And I was drinking in his car, driving home from Wall Street, and he was listening to the Joe and Charlie tapes, and I was drunk in his car. You know, I had no intention to stop, you know, and he said, why don't you come with me, Todd, to a meeting? And, you know, all you have to do is sit in the back. It's a speaker meeting. You don't even have to say anything. You don't even have to introduce yourself. But what this guy did, I had no intention of stopping at that point. But what this guy did for me was he planted that seed of hope. You know, he put his hand out, you know, and what we read about in our literature, that flimsy reed, you know, at first it's a flimsy reed, turns out to be the loving hand of God, you know, and I didn't see that at the time. And I wasn't done. You know, we always share our network too. Are you done yet? You know, and many times I thought I was done. I just wasn't done yet. You know, I always had that one thought that overpowered all other thoughts with no solution. It's going to be different this time, you know? And one day I could do this again like a normal person. I could pick up a drink like a normal person. The delusion is astonishing. That's what it says in our literature. It's astonishing. And I keep going on. So I finally go to this one meeting. I agree to it after some time. And again, this kid's getting sober and I'm out there with him. I become, where we talk about as newcomers, the people, places, and things. I become the people in his life. And I'm drinking out with him at dinner and come on and drink, and totally no respect for this. And he takes me to my first meeting at a little church here in a town where I live. And it was a speaker meeting. I sat in the back and I remember my life at this point was 100% unmanageable, and guy after that meeting came up to me and he said, "Hey, you never have to feel that way again." And was I done? Like I said at that point, no. But I just remember that guy saying, this was many, many years ago. I just remember this feeling that I had come over me. And it was like, you know what? Everything in my life that was going on up to this point, I was the problem, and it just hit me, it was a spiritual moment for me at that point. And I just realized that at the time, I just remember that, and of course I was not done. So what happens, by the way, almost 11 years ago, I just want to share this, Wall Street trader, as I'm progressing downward, this disease, I was homeless. I used to eat at the Bergen County shelter. So we're talking about from Park Avenue, to the park bench, that's my story. And I want to just share about that, and I kept going lower and lower, finally, as I'm going lower, I'm doing more of the suggestions that I heard at the beginning. I heard don't drink and go to meetings. Oh, that was great. I could do that. I didn't hear get the sponsor that I shared about at the beginning when I opened up the meeting. I didn't hear, get to God and pray, So I took this, as we say, cafeteria style, how Todd wanted to manipulate the program, self-will, run riot. I want to run this program the way I want to run it and take any suggestion that I think I should take, not all the suggestions. And we read about in our literature too, half measures. I'm a half measures guy my whole life up to this point, right? And half measures availed me, not half, nothing, and I'm going to do this program half measured. And I heard the part of don't drink, go to meetings. And I was doing that for a while. And I share this because it's really important. You're looking at a guy too that was in a 12-step program. I'm not doing the 12 steps and I'm saying this is not working, and I think at one point I had 90 days. You talk about the bedevilments on page 52 of the big book. I am living those things. And that's with a drink and without a drink, right? So I'm sitting there at page 52 on the bedevilments and I'm miserable, and I white knuckled it. Dry drunk, we call it, right? Up to this point, I just didn't drink and go to meetings. So now you took away my solution of alcohol. I'm up to this point of my life is completely unmanageable, but I'm not drinking. My friends used to say, Todd, you're miserable, man. Just drink. What's going on with you? Hey, you're unbelievable. No, I'm not drinking. I'm going to AA meetings, And again, what happened? I think I remember I had 91 days and I got a bright idea. My sponsor always tells me, we always get bright ideas. He says, if you ever get a bright idea, let me know. I got a bright idea after 91 days of untreated sobriety, not drinking and going to meetings. I thought I was working a great program, going to 2 or 3 meetings a day, no sponsor. If you asked me if I had a sponsor, by the way, I would tell you I did. I would tell you that I'm working the steps. You didn't even know where the steps were in the big book, didn't even know what the big book looked like. But 91 days, I got a bright idea. My sister was going with her husband to Mexico. She said, why don't you come with me, brother, to Mexico? I'll buy you the ticket. I know you've been down on your luck. Come with me and I'll pay for your ticket and hotel. I had the meeting book that I was going to go to. I called up that guy that got me to my first meeting. And I said, Adam, I'm going to go to Mexico. And he said, cancel that ticket. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, Todd, you're going to drink if you go to Mexico. And I said, my delusional thinking, I said, this guy's jealous. He wishes he was going to Mexico. When I'm blinded, when I'm totally blinded and I'm living in that delusion, I can't differentiate the truth from the false, and that's my truth. And he's telling me not to go. So like a good alcoholic, he's jealous. I go 91 days. I'm in the middle of Mexico, white knuckling it, had all my little meetings planned, my meeting book that I'm going to. I'm on the beach, it says in our literature, not a cloud on the horizon. Suddenly the thought came to mind, and I get right up from that beach chair and I go right over to the bar like I shared about at that wedding. And I go right to the drink. And my brother looks at me and he says, you should call. He didn't really know much about the program, but he told me, you should call your sponsor. And I said, no, again, the mental obsession was on me, physical craving picked up. Now I can't stop. And then the unmanageability, And my recovery starts. I come back though first. and I had to still suffer for another 6 months and keep digging out my bottom and going lower and lower and lower. And when, when people always share, it can't get any worse. Take it from me and what I'm sharing tonight, it could always get worse, and I'm an example of that. It could always get worse. I see people come in, they still have their families, they still have their wives, they still have their jobs. And I'm like, just please, get with someone that has something you want, go through this process. You don't have to go to the bottom like I did to maybe give this program a shot. It talks about the scrap heap, in our literature, brought back to a new level. We don't have to get to that scrap heap. I did, that was my story and my truth. So I'm at that low bottom point. At this point, suicide is an option, and it's like, this is what's going to happen. Selfish and self-centered, right? It's all about me. And I came back and I was lying in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and some people could identify and some people can't, but I was, I came and I had 3 days back. Next day I had 95 days back. Next day I had 180 days. People are like, what's wrong with this guy? He can't even, he had 3 days. How does he have 95 days the next day? I was living the lie because I was afraid what you might think of me, and you might pass judgment on me, so this went on for a while, and again, I'm in the book, and just, I could not tell you that I went back out and I could not raise my hand and say I had one day, again, step one, and again, you're looking at someone that took 30 years to get step one, right? So on September 10th of 2012, prior to my surrender date, a guy had approached me in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous with his number written on a little piece of paper. And he said, hey, if you ever want to go through the 12 steps of recovery, you can call me sponsor, half sponsor, temp sponsor. But if you ever want to go through the recovery outlined in the first 164 pages of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, give me a call. Here's my number. And again, I politely took his number. I was still in that delusion. I was still in the fight. And I had no intention to call this guy, that was 2 weeks prior to my surrender date, and on my surrender date, I woke up and, the night before, by the way, was my normal night out with, 20, 30 drinks. I don't have to get into details. It's a normal night for me, right at this point. And I came to the next day and, spiritual experience, spiritual awakening. I just knew that I could not do this anymore on my own power. And I found that guy's number and I called him up and I said, I need help. I can't stop, and he said, great. He said, get a highlighter, a big book and a pen and be at my house at 6 o'clock on Wednesday night. And he gave me his address, and that's where my recovery began. As soon as I went to his house that night, we had put the triangle and circle back in our big book, right on the first page, unity. Oh yeah, I'm doing that. Service. Yes, I was doing that. And then recovery part, I had this another level of spiritual awakening. It just hit me right then and there that first night. And again, I shared, I'm a guy in a 12-step program. I'm not doing the 12 steps and I can't stop drinking, And from that point on, the recovery part found in the first 164 pages, my life is from that point on, I had raised my hand. I had 1 day back, next day I had 2 days. The day after I had 3 days, I had totally surrendered, to the process. I didn't have to go to a meeting 20 miles away because my neighbor might see me there and I can't share in front of that guy. I couldn't go to, I was just, my ex-wife would put terrible things about me on social media. I was so free of this stuff. So for me, I didn't have to wait, to the 9th step to have these promises. As soon as I surrendered, took the gloves off, got out of the ring and surrendered. Step one, my life changed almost immediately from that night on. We had gone through the 12 steps of recovery. And what happens? I get to that 12th step with him. And basically, I said, what do I do? How do I ever repay you for what you've done for me? And he just looks at me and he said, you have to freely give away what was so freely given to you, and it talks about in our literature about, father striking the limitless load, which pays dividends as long as he gives it away, and it's like, it was so powerful to me, and from that moment on, that's it. I'm giving this stuff away. Today, I sponsor men and women in the program, and it's just such a beautiful gift, sobriety. And I want to share something too that, might help some people. I think it was about 7 years in the program. That second part of step one, the unmanageability, started creeping back into my life, and what did I do? I immediately knew for me that I had to take action. The drink obsession had been removed by God at this point, but it was, how am I living my life? How am I practicing these principles in all my affairs? Those last 4 chapters out of the 164. How am I living? How am I living right now? The drink, I can't say, oh, well, I had a drink, so that's why I'm acting out, and for me, it was just in step 10, when it talks about resting on my laurels, I was spiritually stunted, my growth spiritually, and I think it was 7 years in, and I had gone through the steps again, and it was just a whole nother level of spiritual growth for me. It was just so powerful, and I share that, with people that might have some time in the program, and again, those bedevilments on page 52 started to creep back in with years in the process, So, for me, when my experience with going through the steps is, I talk about that step 1, and again, 30 years to get to step 1. I talk about that mental obsession, it's on me. I go to bed every waking hour. I'm thinking about it. I'm going to bed. It's on me. Once I pick up that physical craving, I can't stop. I take one, one is not enough. 10's too many. I just can't stop, and I did this for years, and then the unmanageability of my life, that spiritual malady, and that's before and after, I pick up a drink. And for me, my step 1 experience too, it was like, for the first time in my life, in my 30 years of drinking alcohol, that little time, that church, that guy planted that seed of hope into my mind. When that guy had approached me that night, I had no idea, and I said, by the way, that at that meeting, when I went around the room, I actually said, I'm Todd and I'm an alcoholic, and that was a really powerful for me step 1 experience. But however, I was not done. I was not done. I had to keep going lower, and then, as we move along, I came to believe that this power greater than myself can restore me to sanity. And what does that look like? Before I can accept this step, I have to accept my insanity in step 1, right? And what does that look like? For me, the insanity isn't, all the crazy stories, the war stories. That's not the insanity. The insanity to me looks like what I shared earlier. How am I going to do this again? And guess what? How is it going to be different this time? That's the insanity. They told me this disease centers in my mind, and this unmanageability, second part of step 1, it prevents me. It's blocking me from God, So this is a part 2, where this willingness to believe now on the step 2, it's essential for me to my recovery, and this is getting me into step 3. But before, I always think of step 2. I always think of that second step question as I'm getting there. Either God is everything or he's nothing, it's where am I at, and this gets me into the next step 3. I made a decision, to turn my thinking and my actions over to God, and I always, I get into every day when I do my prayer meditation, I always say, as part of that, the 3rd step prayer. So up until this point, this is Todd running the show. I talked about self-will run riot. This is where I'm at. I'm the director. I'm the principal. I'm the father. You know what I'm saying? And this is what my life looks like, untreated. And now I'm starting to, let God in to get this power. And I'm starting to let God, turning it over to God, right? Step 3, I'm turning my will and my life, my thinking and my actions over to God, and whatever that looks like. And I did this. Do I do this perfectly? Absolutely not. But I started to, and slowly getting out of the fight, slowly. And when I do this, self-reliance fails me as I'm building up to these steps, and I'm getting into step 4. So when I get up to the 4th step, what am I looking at? Right now, I'm writing down this inventory with my sponsor. And I never forget, I sat down with him that night, and, he gave me these sheets, and the first one was resentments. And I just looked at him and I said, I got no resentments. I'm good. And he goes, no, a resentment means, I didn't know. I was a grown man, but I can honestly say I had no idea what a resentment was, so I have no resentments. And he tells me, no, a resentment means to feel and refeel over and over, Todd. 15 years ago, when somebody did such and such to you, and you're talking about it, and I'm saying, oh, did that happen last week? And you're saying, no, it happened 30 years ago. That's a resentment, and I had a guy that came out and said, I have no resentments. I had about 10 to 15 pages written of resentments after this, you know. So this step, I mean, it talks about it too in our literature, you know, this is as far as most people got. You know, this is where vigorous action, where the rubber hits the road. And I tell guys and girls that I go through the 12 steps of recovery with, you know, I could read to you all week. We could highlight and everything, but this is where the ball goes to your court. And this is where you start to see your truths, you know, and then their fourth column in that fourth step, what was Todd's part in this, you know? And, you know, I had a sponsor tell me one time, this is the best you could have done. This is the best you could have done with Todd running the show. No God. And it's all Todd running the show. And this is my life, you know, and we did resentments, we did fears, we did a sex inventory, which is basically relationships. And, you know, it says make a thorough, you know, moral equals truthful inventory. And whatever that looks like, you know, and I always share with guys and girls who are doing this, going through this process, whatever that looks like, you know, you're not going to be graded on this. These are your truths. And these are the truths that are going to set me free, you know, whatever that looks like. And that's what you got to put down, you know, to be cast out, you know, as we're going into the fifth step, you know. So again, fifth step with me was sat down with my sponsor. We made a time. It took me, you know, I was balking on the fourth step, you know, and I didn't want to do this, you know, and he just said, just write this stuff down, Todd. You know, you're holding the key in your hand, put it in, open the door, man. This is going to set you free. You got to do this. And I finally did it. And he explained to me that, you know, that life and death errand that we're going on, you know. So I did it. We've set up a fifth step and, you know, I let it all out. You know, one thing that I do that my sponsor did with me before we sat down and do that fifth step, you know, before we cast the stuff out, he told me, Todd, I want you to write something on that piece of paper that you were going to take to your grave. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, that one secret that you're holding that you're not going to tell me, I want you to write that down, you know. And again, truthful, moral inventory, you know, everything, put it down, you know. And I do that today. And, you know, sometimes people write stuff and sometimes they don't. But again, I always share this with people, you know, how free do you want to be? And that's what it came down to for me. I'll tell him that, but I'm not going to do that. He might think this of me if I say that. And again, how free do you want to be? And that's only for me to know, you know, and I want to be free. So I want everything in here, you know. Did the fifth step. It was so freeing. I remember like when I was first doing it, we're at a park and like people were walking by. So I'd get real quiet when some, you know, lady would walk by with a carriage at the park. I'd be real quiet when I was reading my fifth step to him. And then, you know, that was like the first 10 minutes. And after the first hour, man, I was just letting it all out. You know, I was free, you know, all that root and branch out, you know, stuff that I was holding in for 30 years, you know, casting it all out. This is all spiritual growth for me and freedom, you know. It was so freeing. And, you know, step 6 and 7, you know, step 6 and 7, they said should be done. See how much time we got. Okay. Step 6 and 7 should be done an hour, you know, within doing the fifth step, you know. And I remember I was a grown man laying in my bed. I had gone home and, you know, we had done the prayer and gone home. And I said, okay, I'm ready to have God remove all these defects of character, you know. And then I asked God, you know, and I sat there and, you know, I asked God, you know, not that he removed them at once, but I asked him, right. And I woke up the next day and I said, you know, I thought somehow, some way that a magic wand was going to be, you know, over me. And the next day I wake up and all these defects of character be gone. My phone rang and it was my ex-wife. And I was like, wow. And those defects started popping back up and I was hitting them down. They were popping up. And, you know, I was a grown man really thinking that they would just be all wiped away in one night. And boy, was I mistaken. You know, it's just, again, it's growth, right? And whatever that looks like. You know, these defects, you know, they're my character, right? And again, it's that daily reprieve for me. And that's what it comes down to, you know, for me. Again, I experienced the miracles of 6 and 7 on my actions of 8 and 9 when I get to those steps, right? 8, I'm making that inventory, you know, it's just all these people that I harmed, you know. And the way I did it with my sponsor is we put a plus sign, everybody I'm ready to make an amends to, making that list. A minus sign, I'm not yet ready. And I'm never going to be ready, you know. And the beautiful thing, my experience with this process is as I grow spiritually, those nevers become minus signs and those minuses become plus signs, you know. And it was just so beautiful. I mean, I can't you know, express, you know, as I'm growing, okay, spiritually. And again, I get to now I'm writing this inventory, you know, a lot of it was from my resentments and stuff like that from my fourth step, you know, but as I now approaching step 9, I'm going out, you know, to make an amends to these people, not an apology. There's a difference, you know, I'm making an amends to them. You know, how do I make this right? How do I wrong this right? How did this make you feel? You know, these are the questions I'm asking after I'm making my amends, right? For me, you know, most of them were, the thing is for me, it's willingness, you know, and I have a lot of people too. When I surrender and I let God do his thing, it's just unbelievable. I have guys tell me, you know, people I'm taking through the steps and we're going through this process and they say, look, I have this amends to make, but I'm never going to see that person. And I tell them, just pray on it and let God do his thing. And when that happens, you know, you'll be amazed. You know, I had one quick story I'll share. When we're on this amends process, this kid said, I'm never going to see this woman. You know, she moved out of the state. I'm never going to see her again. And I said, just be willing to make an amends to her. And that's the deal, and pray on it. And about a week or two later, he said, you're not going to believe this. And I said, what? He said, I was over at Target and I get up with my stuff at the cashier and that woman's standing there, you know? And it's just like, I got the chills saying that, you know, it's just so, my point is it's so powerful if I just get out of the way and let God do his thing, you know? And through this amends process, you know, my ex-wife, by the way, used to write letters to the prosecutor here in Bergen County to put me away for life behind bars. Okay. This woman wanted me dead, you know, for, you know, my behavior in the past, you know, and through this process, you know, and on page 567, where it talks about that spiritual experience, you know, friends of the newcomer noticed a change in them long before they do. You know, when I was going through this process, you know, I made amends to her. I get to see the kids for an hour once a month. And she would tell me, she'd look in my eyes and go, there's something different about you. And in my mind, I'm saying, oh, you know, again, that delusional thinking, oh, she wants to get back together with me. I would tell my sponsor, and he goes, no, man, she doesn't want nothing to do with you, but there's something different about you. See, I had undergone that profound change that the book talks about, you know, that spiritual experience or spiritual awakening. I had no idea. And it talks about it on 567 in the big book. Friends of the newcomer notice the change in them long before they do, you know, and I started to have the spiritual awakening, you know, everything, vast change, alteration about everything, a new outlook on life. And it was just so beautiful, you know, this process, you know, amends. I made amends to my mother, my father, you know, everyone, you know, that I had, you know, that I had, you know, made these harms to, you know, it was just so powerful, you know, and again, I could talk about that for hours, but as I'm moving on, you know, steps 10 and 11, you know, every day it was suggested to me that I read pages 84 to 88 daily, you know, and step 10 is not about it writing an inventory to me, you know, it's about my awareness of how I'm treating people. You know, that's where I'm at this point. You know, how am I treating the guy at Dunkin' Donuts today? You know, how am I living? You know, how am I really interacting with others and my awareness to them, you know? And I love this step and the promise in the 10th step when it talks about, I have ceased fighting everything and anything, even alcohol, you know, it is if the problem has been removed. You know, man, I was in a fight for 30 years, you know, fighting everyone. It's his fault. It's the boss's fault and everything, you know? And when I get to this point, I'm free. You know, it talks about walking through that arch. I'm free, you know, and what happens for me at this point, it's totally about, I'm gonna use an example of what this looks like for me in real life, you know, as if the problem as if the problem has been removed. It does not exist for us. We're cocky. You know, I remember I was with my young daughter. We went to one of these, we get to go on vacation. My young daughter, she was, I think, 5 years old. And when they have these little bars that you swim up at one of these island resorts. And I was some years, you know, sober. And we swam up to the bar and she wants to get her little Shirley Temple. And we sit up and we go up there and I'm just sitting there and I'm looking, they have all the, you know, the liquor and stuff on the bar. And, you know, and for me, it's just like, that's that step 10 promise, you know, I'm not even thinking about that. You know, I'm just there enjoying myself. And that's what I always use that as an example of putting this stuff into real life, these steps in my life. You know, the problem has been removed, you know, and later on in that little 2 pages of step 10, it talks about resting on my laurels. You know, I explained, you know, resting on my laurels, I think, you know, pretty good. And that's resting on my past achievements. I get to a certain point at 7 years in this process and I'm like, I'm good. You know, I'm taking people through the steps. I'm going to meetings. I'm doing service. I'm good. And I wasn't, And again, my buddy always says, well, what was wrong with your past experience? Nothing, it's just spiritual growth, constantly growing spiritually. Do I do it perfect? Absolutely not. I fall short all the time. So I check the time. Okay. So going on to 11, prayer and meditation, at this point, my daily morning starts pretty much most days with prayer and meditation, talking and listening to God, and I think I was 5 years into the program where I started getting into a method of listening, really listening, not just talking, but actually listening for the voice, and that again was a whole nother level of spiritual growth for me, and it talks about it in step 11, when we get to this point now, I'd gone through these steps, it talks about the divine influence, and it says in our big book, it says, I come to rely upon it, and it also talks about there's going to come a time and place in everyone's life that the only thing between me and a drink is God, and I always think about this part of the book, so where am I at this point? I'm praying, I'm meditating, I'm letting God do his thing, and they tell me that the miracle of step 11 happens when I get off my knees and carry this message out into the world. It's just so powerful when I'm open to it, and do I fall short? Absolutely. And I introduced myself as a recovered alcoholic, and I always tell, what do you recover from? Mental and physical, right? Physically and mentally, but that daily reprieve, that's the spiritual part. That's daily for me. How am I living? Did I pray today? Where am I at with my higher power that I call God? You hear this is it's not a religious program, it's a spiritual program, but it's a God of your understanding. And today I have to say, I could share this on this call that the most important thing today in my life is my relationship with my higher power that I call God. Do I love my wife dearly? Do I love my children today dearly? But the most important thing, is my relationship with God. And I always say to people, when they say, whatever you put in front of me, you're drinking, you're going to lose. For me, it's whatever I put in front of God, I'm going to lose, And I'm going to share, I'll share for a couple of minutes, another 10 minutes or so. I want to talk about, that step 12 process, and for me, working with others, at this point, I've had that spiritual awakening, as a result of going through the 12 steps, I try to carry this message, the message found in the book, and practicing these principles, right, in all my affairs, and step 12. And like I shared earlier, when I had finished the step, I told my sponsor, what do I do? Work with others, Todd. How many people are you sponsoring? Raise your hand. I hear people too, 20, 30 years, 10 years, they go back out, and it's always like, oh, I stopped going to meetings, and, I was asked the question, how many people am I working with? How many people am I taking through the book? I don't know. That's a consideration for me, So I try to do that today with others, and the way this process works for me, when I'm taking other people through this book, people used to say it helps me more, than it's helping you. And I used to say, wow, that's a bunch of stuff, and today actually having that experience to do that, it's an experience that you don't want to miss. And it says that in there. And, I try to put these steps to real life examples for me. And one example was I had taken a guy through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous in the big book. And, we had lost touch. He had gone through the 12 steps with me. And I had taken him through the book and we lost touch. And it was about 5 or 6 years out. I haven't seen him. We lost touch. And I was driving on one of the interstates here. And the guy I was on the road. And the guy, I'd forgotten about him. And, just remember who he was and his name. And we met for about 6 months and worked together. But anyway, he pulls up alongside of me. And he starts yelling at me out the window, hey, you remember me? And, I said, yeah, I remember him from his beard that he had. And I said, yeah, I remember you. And he said, man, I just got engaged. I said, oh, that's great. I just, started my own business. This is my truck I'm driving. I said, that's awesome. And he said, I got 7 years sober. It's just, and again, I share that because, God working through us, sometimes we say something or share a message of hope to someone, and it's life-changing, and working with others like they say, it's an experience you don't want to miss. So what do I do, daily when I go to meetings and I see someone counting days, I don't wait for people to come up to me. I actually approach them, give them my number. And what do? I just put my hand out to them. Hi, my name is Todd. Give me a call, and I tell them, not to sponsor you, not to, be your temp sponsor, your half sponsor. But if you want to ever go through the 12 steps of recovery, please reach out to me and give me a call, and that's all I do today, to newcomers. And whether they call or not, that's on them. But what I do is I just plant that seed of hope. So for me, it's about giving this stuff away constantly. Do I do it? There's times when I don't want to, answer that call or going to do that 12-step call, and I always say, when someone's looking for a sponsor, how do I get a sponsor? I always ask, tell that person to ask, if you're looking for someone, get with someone that is something that you want and ask them that 12 step, have you had a spiritual awakening as a result of the 12 steps? It's very simple. If they look at you like you're crazy, then I don't know if they have something that I want, but if they, are open to that, because I had someone approach me many years ago and tell me that exact question. And I said, yeah, I'm just a guy for you. And the guy's sober now over 5 years, it's just a very powerful process. And in recovery, at the beginning, if you would have told me, I'm going to have the things today in my life and this life beyond my wildest dreams. Okay. People used to say that and I used to laugh at them. Oh, you're going to have this great life. They used to say it gets better. And I said, what are you talking about? It gets better. I then realized, they told me, you're the it, man. People are not going to change around you. You're going to change. Like I shared about that spiritual experience with my wife, ex-wife earlier, when she would see me, it's that transformation. This whole process for me just revolutionized my whole life, and I shared that I was sleeping for so long, but I had to be unblocked. You're looking at someone that was blocked for so long, So this process, once I was open to it and surrendered, and I don't mean just recovering from my last run of runs. When I was totally done with this process, surrendered to God of my understanding, third step, I offer myself to thee. When I totally had done that, honestly, not just faked it till I made it, I had this fast change in my life, and I can't explain it. I can't describe it. Things started to happen in my life that, I couldn't say, oh, that's a coincidence or that just happened or this just happened. But again, once I surrendered, I can't explain this, this process of people that are spiritually awakened and have had spiritual experience understand exactly what I'm saying, but it didn't happen until I totally surrendered. And it took me a long time to get this process, and I always share with people what people used to tell me, don't leave before the miracle happens. And I see guys in this process and women leaving this process, they leave before that miracle happens, and they told me, you're going to go to a lot of funerals in this process. And I said, what are you talking about? And it's a sin, that we're here on this program, safe and protected. And people, out there are dying, and they don't get to get this gift, of sobriety. And it's just, again, it's really powerful. I think we've got a couple minutes left. I'm going to wrap it up there, but, I just wanted to thank you guys again for letting me be of service, bringing you a 12-step message and just share my truths with you guys openly, so thank you guys very much, for letting me share tonight. I really do appreciate it. Thank you.